We're on to our last presentation of the day, which is a pre-recorded video presentation from Dr. Krishna Abhishek Ghosh, who is the director of the Institute for Vaiṣṇava Studies and a senior editor for the Journal of Vaiṣṇava Studies. He holds a master's degree in theology and religious studies from Oxford University and a PhD in South Asian languages and civilizations from the University of Chicago, where he basically studied the subject of Vaishnavism in the West, which is a huge subject. He is taught at the University of Chicago's Graham School of General Studies, where he won the Dean's Award for Excellence in Teaching, and he served as the professor of Hinduism and World Religions at Grand Valley State University in Michigan. He is currently physically present at the American Academy of Religions conference in Houston, is it? Austin, somewhere in Texas. And so he has done us the service of pre-recording a video for us to display, which has the added benefit of known length. And so he will definitely stop on time. I believe the video is about 23 minutes long. He's going over by 3 minutes and 26 seconds, but there's nothing we can do about it. We can play it double time for the last minute. Yeah. Right. You want to say something, Don? No. All right. So without further ado, the pre-recorded Dr. Ghosh. No, that's somebody else.
For allowing me to present. After which I explore the historical roots of the temple within the immediate Gauḍīya and Bengali contexts, before offering some concluding comments on the relation between temple architecture and how it represents generational symbols marking the various forms of evolving Hindu Vaishnavism. The first section, the TOVP in our times. The TOVP is emerging as one of the largest Hindu temples in the Indian landscape and is joining a league of iconic structures, including temples and statues, coming up in our generation that are becoming a significant representation of modern Hindu thought and evolution. The Ram Janmabhoomi temple in Ayodhya, the Vrindavan Chandrodaya temple in the Braj region with a Disney-like Krishna Lila theme park, the Statue of Unity, which is the world's tallest statue at 597 feet at Narmada, Gujarat, and the Statue of Equality, a 216 feet tall statue of Ramanujacharya commemorating his 1000th year, are just a few examples of this new religious construction. Since the beginning of liberalization of the Indian economy that started in July 1991, the flow of global capital in Indian markets and the rise of a nouveau riche and a burgeoning middle class is perhaps a major reason behind these structural manifestations. The TOVP, however, is international in its scope and has significant contributions from foreign sources, unlike many of the other structures mentioned here. In this sense, the Gauḍīya Vaiṣṇava voice within the larger cultural context of 21st century Hinduism in India is represented de facto through this temple emerging in a remote village in Bengal called Mayapur. At this juncture, it is important to note that the total Vaishnava population, according to the book, The World's Religions and Figures, an Introduction to International Religious Demography, published in 2013, Vaishnavas constitute about 67% of Hinduism, which totals approximately to about 800 million adherents. According to the Religion Media Center, ISKCON's population is about 1 million, according to the internal reports of ISKCON published in 2019. Given the recent economic growth in India and the growth of Vaishnavas that are members of ISKCON, I believe this is a conservative estimate. But even so, this places Gauḍīya or Chaitanya Vaishnavas coming through ISKCON at approximately 0.13% of the entire Vaishnava population that is present on earth today. This is, if we were to consider the existing numbers provisionally unless more statistics are available. In terms of the realpolitik of our times in which the TOVP is being built, India is undergoing tectonic shifts in the area of temple construction, and major iconic landmarks are being built in our generation. Even though traditional Indian temples regularly demonstrate a Puranic cosmology on their walls, this is the first time European technology is being used in the construction of a large-scale temple. The TOVP is unique since the demonstration of this Puranic cosmological system will be inside the dome rather than on its exterior walls. In this regard, ISKCON is at the forefront of this conversation and has the unique first mover's advantage of reintroducing ancient concepts of Puranic cosmology to a contemporary audience. It is therefore not a surprise that this landmark is going to outlast our lifetimes, if I look at it as a historian, and define the way Hindu cosmology engages with modern scientific views of the universe. There are many members of this conference who are much more well-versed in the details of the cosmology we find in the 5th canto of the Bhagavad Purana. And Vaishnava scholars like Dr. Richard L. Thompson or Sadaputa Das have already made tremendous contributions in bridging the gap between Puranic notions of our universe and the latest modern scientific discoveries that differ from this ancient narrative. It is no easy task, and as we have experienced, conversations on this topic will be ongoing and dialectical in nature. It is my humble attempt to present a caveat and a proposal to those who are interested in this subject matter. In terms of the caveat, while the TOVP is so focused on Srila Prabhupada's vision of presenting Vaishnava cosmology to uninitiated audiences, ISKCON as a movement has not started to reckon with the larger question that this temple is going to throw up, that is, to ISKCON's members and intellectual leaders. How we reconcile the differences between this normative description of this universe presented on behalf of Sanatana Dharma with all of the other divergent perspectives we find in the Puranas and Siddhantas is a debate yet to be resolved. As one of the presenters of this conference, a researcher at the Institute for Vaishnava Studies, will be presenting a paper specifically on reconciling Puranic and Siddhantic narratives, explaining the possibilities of bridging this gap in the future. My proposal is that as scholars studying this historic phenomena, we should attempt to locate the TOVP in its cultural milieu and possess a solid understanding of its history alongside the theology before getting into more scriptural details about the size of the universe and the distance between planets, questions that are quite fraught. After all, science always happens within certain historical and cultural contexts, whether it's European science, Chinese science, or Indian science. This will ensure that we present an intelligible narrative on how Vaishnava cosmology may find its place within the larger structure of Hindu, Indian histories and the academic subject of the history of religions. Moving on to the next section on the scriptural roots of TOVP, I propose that the deepest roots of the temple of the Vedic planetarium go back to the explanations of Bhaktivinoda Thakur in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, known as the Amrita Prabaha Bhashya, and a sub-commentary by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada called Anubhashya. There are also some sections of text like Sri Chaitanya Shikshamrita, Krishna Samhita, and other articles where some of these ideas get repeated, and thus the core arguments with minor iterations are fairly consistent in this Bengali corpus of commentaries and other allied literature. In their commentaries, the process of devotional service is described with the metaphor of a person receiving the seed of bhakti from one's teacher by the grace of Krishna. Brahmando bhromite kono bhagyavan jeev Guru Krishna prasade paye bhakti lata bij, which seed is then cultivated and nurtured through the process of devotional service and meditation. Hearing and chanting Krishna's names and activities, along with narratives about his quality and his beauty, allow this creeper of devotion to grow and eventually travel through the various planetary systems described in the 5th canto of the Bhagavad Purana until it reaches the lotus feet of the divine couple, Sri Sri Radha and Krishna. Here, the flower of the plant of devotion fully blossoms in Prema Bhakti. As I unpack this metaphor further, there are 3 points that I'd like to emphasize in order to be able to properly gauge the importance of this particular argument of a cosmology that our consciousness travels through. First, the Bhagavatam is an epic poem that constitutes the narrative initially discussed that continues the narrative initially discussed in the Mahabharata and its appendix, the Harivamsha. It has been lauded by a long tradition of commentators as a natural commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, a cryptic, aphoristic text that summarizes the wisdom of the Upanishads. Herein, the life of Sri Krishna and his various incarnations are depicted alongside that of his devotees, each playing a different role in these pastimes, often going through some adversity where the Lord rescues them. Just as the Bhagavad presents Sri Krishna as a living embodiment of Vedanta, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the biography of Sri Chaitanya, considered an incarnation of Radha and Krishna, adds another layer of commentary on the Bhagavata centered in a more recent historical context, the 15th, 16th centuries. In this context, in the context of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Mahaprabhu is a living example of Vedanta too, just like Krishna, and fulfills the same theological role as Krishna does in the Bhagavata. Thus, the commentary on the cosmology in the Madhya Lila is actually a continuation of the commentary on cosmology that we find in the Bhagavad Purana. Secondly, the Bhagavad has inspired other works of creative literature, such as Rupa Goswami's Laghu Bhagavatamrita and Sanatana Goswami's Brihad Bhagavatamrita, the little nectar of the Bhagavata and the larger nectar of the Bhagavata, if you were to translate it that way. Although it is beyond the scope of this paper to get into the details of Sanatana Goswami's work, I propose that this particular text is an intersection between rasa theory and Puranic cosmology that combines the cosmological themes of the 5th canto of the Bhagavata and proposes that the devotion of the Gopikas found in the 10th canto is the highest destination, the telos, that one attains as one journeys through the cosmology mentioned in the 5th canto. For a listener of the Bhagavata to attain the same destination as a companion of Krishna in his own abode, a map of the universe has to be made clear to clarify the telos of the journey of a soul throughout the universe. Third, finally, as we read the Purana, we are constantly reminded that it is a story of a great emperor who just had 7 days to live. And the Shukadeva Goswami, who is an Avadhuta, a free soul, and a great yogi, gives the king a map of the overall cosmos, in some part of which he might find himself in his journey back to his beloved Sri Krishna, who he had a brief glimpse of when he was inside his mother's womb. In this sense, the story of Parikshita is that of an individual soul who gets the seed of bhakti through Guru and Krishna and obtains the fruit of the journey through the cosmos. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who continued the mission of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, was attempting innovative methods of representing the theologies and narratives of the Bhagavata and later Goswami works in three-dimensional form through dioramas, bringing them to life with light and sound exhibition shows. The articles of his publication, The Harmonist, and the Bengali journal, the Gauḍīya, present the difficulties Saraswati Thakur had in his attempts to put on these diorama shows at a time when famine and political unrest had broken out in Bengal. He remained steadfast in his argument, however, that the teachings found in the Bhagavata were the ultimate antidote to the material problems we face in this world, and that educating the general population with this knowledge was the highest form of welfare activity. Even though for politicians of his time, it was unacceptable to have a diorama show, being that they considered it to be mere entertainment, Saraswati Thakur insisted that this is the highest service one can do at a time of great adversity. From some fieldwork that I've done over the years, as well as the archival evidence I have gathered on this topic, it seems evident to me that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wanted to represent the journey of an individual soul through the universe, following the description of the Brihad Bhagavatamrita of Sanatana Goswami. In this text, Gopakumara, the hero of this epic, shaped after the Bhagavata, journeys through the universe on a quest to understand the highest form of devotion that a soul can experience. After an exploration of the qualities of bhakti through various devotees, Gopakumara comes to the conclusion that the devotion expressed by the cowherd maidens of Vrindavan is not only the highest form of devotion that a devotee can experience and express, but it is also one that is most dear to Sri Krishna himself. The attempt to represent the cosmology described in the 5th canto in a three-dimensional form is what I understand to be the root of the massive TOVP project that has evolved into what we have today. When the Mayapura Chandrodaya temple, or the temple of the moonrise of Sri Mayapur, referring to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which was to be the headquarters of the ISKCON movement, was inaugurated in the early 70s, Srila Prabhupada invited one of his most learned godbrothers, with whom he had spent a substantial amount of time studying and preaching in the 1940s and 50s, as the chief guest. During the inauguration of the Mayapur temple, the chief guest, Srila Sridhar Maharaj, explained this desire of their spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada, to have a three-dimensional representation of the cosmology of the Bhagavata through the lens of the Brihad Bhagavatamrita that would give the pilgrims an experience of the cosmos through which Gopakumara had traveled, and now future pilgrims to Mayapur would be able to experience in a three-dimensional form. The next section is on the 1970s context of the Vedic Planetarium. The time at which Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada began his public activities in Mayapur was also a time of the Indo-Pakistan War, which saw the birth of Bangladesh and the end of the East Pakistan area, a relic of the Indian partition. It was at a time when millions of Hindu refugees fled to India and were moving to rural areas of Bengal that included the Nadia district, where Mayapur is currently at. With the rise of per capita poverty due to a massive influx of immigrants, inflation, the Communist Party of India began to rise in power in Bengal between 1972 until it won the elections in 1977 and remained in power for the next 34 years until 2011. From the early 70s, radical and violent left-wing Marxist groups called the Naxalites also started local insurgencies. And even though Calcutta was the hotbed of the early non-Indian members of ISKCON, in their attempt to expand the Mayapur project, they were branded as CIA meddling with internal proletariat revolutions, a bad reputation which seems to have largely disappeared today. Within the larger national context, the low per capita income that made India or Bharat a so-called third world country since independence necessitated a range of industrial and infrastructural initiatives that are broadly categorized as Nehruvian by modern Indian historians. The core cultural ethos was to sideline religion, especially Hinduism, which was considered regressive, starting with the narratives of the missionaries in the 17th and 18th century, and instead promote the education of science and technology as the antidote to superstition, alongside enforcing a certain version of Nehruvian secularism as well. In keeping with the ethos of this progress, the Birla family constructed the first planetarium in Bengal in the year 1963 that looked like a Buddhist stupa and used a light and sound show to depict the latest empirical understanding of the cosmos that were available to them. The Birla Planetarium, completed in 1963, and the Vedic Planetarium proposed by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada in 1970s represent distinct philosophical and educational approaches to the understanding of the cosmos in 21st century India, 20th and 21st century India. The Birla Planetarium, reflective of its time, focused on modern astronomy and science, aiming to educate the public about space using contemporary scientific knowledge. In contrast, Prabhupada's Vedic Planetarium was conceptualized as a blend of spirituality and cosmology rooted in ancient Indian scriptures. This project was designed to impart spiritual teachings alongside the cosmological visions contained in the Vedas and Puranas. While both sought to educate and enlighten visitors, their methodologies were markedly different. One through the lens of modern science, and other through ancient spiritual wisdom. Architecturally, the Birla Planetarium embodied the design sensibilities and the technological advancements of the 1960s, creating a space conducive to learning about the cosmos through scientific exhibits. The TOVP, meanwhile, was envisioned as a significant spiritual center, combining traditional Indian temple architecture initially, till the new, later design came up, that represented the Vedic universe inside of the temple premises. These contrasting approaches highlight the cultural and historical contexts of their times. The Birla Planetarium symbolized India's post-independence enthusiasm for science and technology, whereas Prabhupada's Vedic Planetarium was a part of a movement to revive and globalize India's ancient scriptural traditions. The audiences they targeted and the impacts they sought also differed. The Birla Planetarium catered to a general audience interested in space, science, while the Vedic Planetarium aimed to encompass those and attract others who are intrigued by the spiritual and philosophical aspects of cosmology. Together, they exemplify the diverse perspectives through which modern Indian thinkers interpreted and understood the vastness of the cosmos. Conclusion. To conclude, the genealogy of temple crafting in Gauḍīya Vaiṣṇava history maps well with the strategic focus of certain key exemplars of the tradition as they navigated the realpolitik of their historical contexts. In particular, the TOVP currently emerging in Mayapur appears to suggest another recurrence of this historical pattern of Gauḍīya Vaiṣṇava leaders attempting to engage timeless ideas in a timely way. At the turn of the 20th century, when Indo-European encounters were at a peak, a new style of hybrid architecture was brought into existence by Thakur Bhaktivinoda with the construction of Yogapith, which featured semblances of European church architecture while retaining aspects of Gauḍīya Vaiṣṇava architecture. However, his son, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, built more traditional temples where the spires looked like mridangas to be in line with the symbolism of the Vaishnava mridanga drum utilized as a broadcasting instrument. The roots of the TOVP go back to the vision of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and his father Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who sought to represent the stories and the ideas of Bhagavata and its commentaries using the latest technology, and by the early 20th century through dioramas that would provide visual storytelling for pilgrims visiting Mayapur. This, I believe, is the root of the exhibit of planets floating in the dome is attempting to accomplish. In particular, the journey of Gopakumara through the various planetary systems described in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita arguably provides the root narrative of the TOVP. The historical context in which the TOVP was conceived by their disciple, Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, led to the genesis of a Vedic planetarium rather than just a temple during a period of local Bengali communist and Naxalite insurgents. Also, given that Prabhupada expressed the idea of a Vedic planetarium exactly a decade after the construction of India's first modern Birla Planetarium, reaffirms my working thesis. Temples are created by leaders in conversation with their socio-economical and cultural milieus. Thus, the temple of the Vedic planetarium, unprecedented in the history of modern Hinduism, suggests that temple construction in Gauḍīya Vaishnavism has historically and repeatedly blended timeless aspects of the tradition with cultural idioms that they thought were timely and contemporary. This is still a work in progress, and I apologize for not being able to present this paper in person, but I would appreciate your questions, comments, corrections, and ideas. Please write to me at abhi, A-B-H-I, @ibs.edu with your thoughts, and I will try my best to get back to you as quickly as I can. Thank you very much for listening to this presentation, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
So that concludes our last presentation for the day.